Hi, this is Dan Dowd. I'm talking to you live from Nashville, Tennessee, and we're going to talk baseball tonight. I'm going to take a few questions and I'm going to answer them and see where the conversation goes. First question was, if my son was 4 or 5, son or daughter, if was 4 or 5 years old, and they were picking up a baseball, softball for the very first time, what would I do to actually begin to create a foundation for that child to move forward in their chosen sport? Well, a 4 or 5-year-old grooming to the big leaguer, we have a lot of steps to take before we get to that point in time. But, baseball, like any other sport, you have to create an emotional connection for the child at a very young age. And the best thing to do to create that emotional connection is actually to take time to play with them. And playing with him, here's what I mean by that. Find a soft ball and a plastic bat, try to get a little tee, and then try to do some simple, very small drill work with him, just tossing him the ball and getting him to feel like how he can track it to try to catch it with both hands and then throw it back to you. Put the ball on the tee and let him just take swings on the tee and just focusing more along the lines of the simplicity of just taking the bat to the ball and nothing else at all. And the key with baseball, even starting at the 4 and 5-year-old level, all the way up to the big league level, it is the consistency of what you're doing, meaning try to do it as often as you can, as long as the attention span is going to allow you to do that. And then try to keep it as simple as you possibly can and try to create some connections of joy, which leads to the most powerful force involved in baseball at all, which is the actual love of the game. The question was, okay, progressing from a young man who's 4 or 5 up now to the high school level, what can a parent do to probably put his son or daughter, if she's in a softball program, in the best possible position of being able to compete and hopefully make a high school team? I think there's a lot of steps involved before you get to the high school level. Again, when you start at that early of an age, I think it's imperative that you get him on a good team. And when I say a good team, it's just around a group of people that really do understand that the fundamentals of the game need to be taught well and be able to taught simply. Okay, for an example, when you play catch with your son, make it target practice. Make sure that you put up your glove and make sure that he hits your glove every time he possibly can, and consistently move the glove in different spots in the center of your body so he can play target practice with you and then continue working out further and further, excuse me, until he can get that target practice done, at a distance that allow him to make the throw across the diamond or from the outfield into the infield. From the hitting standpoint, try to get a feel for what your son or daughter's natural swing actually is. When you put a bat in their hand, they're going to tell you a little bit about how their body works in conjunction with their swing. And don't ever take that away from them. And let them hit as naturally as they possibly can. And please don't overcoach them. We live in a society today that we overcoach some of the natural rhythm and tendencies that children actually have. So let them feel their way through that. Slowly start tossing the ball to them in a soft toss, front drill. It could be underhand, it could be overhand. Just getting them to track the ball and then continue to move back little by little by little. And then when you get them into a little league situation, don't worry so much about the quality of the team that they're on. Try to get them in a position where their skill level will allow them to have some success like right away, because that builds confidence. That also builds a desire to continue to want to play the game. And then let their skill level matriculate at its own pace. There's not a development timeline for any child at all. That timeline is developed by the child. But as he begins to master different skills, i.e. if he's an infielder, you work on the fundamentals of infield play. You roll on the ball, you get his hands in a proper position, his feet underneath him. If he's an outfielder, you work on leads and breaks and him tracking balls in the outfield. Whatever position that he seems to have a passion for, put him in that particular position and do constant daily repetition work as much as you possibly can, and also allow him to play as many other sports as he possibly can, because it allows him to utilize his athletic ability and get his body to move in different ways, which is only going to help him be a better baseball player. So getting back to your original question, before he gets to that high school level, you've got to lay a solid foundation for him at a younger level of getting him on the right team, getting him in the right environment, getting him at a skill level that suits him. And then you personally create the kind of time that connects the both of you, where you work on his game on a daily basis as much as your time will allow and as much as his time will allow. If you do all that, by the time he gets to the high school level, he'll be well positioned to try to compete for a job at that particular level. The question was, how do we take all the different aspects that make up an athlete? So it's the fundamental part of playing. It's the mental ability to have defined focus, because the game of baseball is truly about defined focus. The old saying goes, the game of baseball is 99% physical, 1% mental, but the 1% mental controls the 99% physical, and that's true. That's another vertical. And the last vertical I call is the physical vertical. It's the development of the athletic body. And I can tell you, in our game, even at an early level, we sometimes want to work as hard as we possibly can on the fundamental part of the game, when in reality, it's the physicality, it's the athletic development that either is allowing a child to do something or preventing a child to do something. So to me, if you look at those three buckets, you have to fill all of those equally. A young man has to be conditioned well. The game of baseball is about executing the proper movement patterns in the context of the game to execute a particular skill. And so at a very early age, you have to get him with the right physical training person that, one, understands the game of baseball, and two, understands that it's not about building necessarily strength. It's about creating a well-balanced body with strength that moves the right way on the field, because the game of baseball involves balance, rhythm, and timing. But the first thing is balance. And so if you don't have an athletically balanced child, he's going to struggle then to execute the fundamental part of the game. And then the mental part of the game is something else. And those are conversations that you can have with him as a mom or dad about, what were you focused on? What were you thinking about? Was it hard to see certain things on the field? So you create this awareness within him or her, and I call that baseball IQ, the awareness of what's going on in the game. For an example, you sit and watch a game with your child. You just don't watch the game, you talk about the game. You talk about the things that go on inside the game. You ask questions, you debate. You create an emotional connection with them as you watch the game. And that develops their mental acuity about the game. And that teaches them awareness about the game and allow them to also begin to recognize some things themselves and apply that on the field. So the fundamental part of the game is something everybody works on, but those other two buckets, the physical part of the game, that's the performance science behind the game, that's the strength and conditioning behind the game, and the mental part of the game, that's just as important as the fundamental part of playing. Just the last question was, is there anything else I'd like to touch on? The game of baseball is about deliberate practice. It's about making incremental improvements every single day. Where you start at this journey doesn't matter as much as where you end up at the journey. So you don't have to be the best player starting out, but your goal each and every day is to work towards incremental improvement. When great players become great because they have a lot of good days. Good days of consistent performance and work add up to great days. And when you go to practice, there's two types of mindsets. There's a training mindset and there's a trusting mindset. When you do your work in the cage and when you're doing your fundamental work, that's great. That's a training mindset. But at some point in time, it's about competing. And even at an early age, you have to learn how to compete on a baseball field. And all those things you can get better at by just working at it gradually every single day with deliberate and focused practice. If you do that, you're going to end up being a very, very good player. And if you get in the right opportunity and you get some good breaks along the way, you got a chance then to be also a big league player.